Yo, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy George. Welcome back to the channel, AG Nation, Achieving Greatness. I'm glad that you came. Thank you. I love you. No, really though. Stay tuned though. I'm glad that you came. Let's get it. To Scottie Pippen's beef with Charles Barkley, his beef history. You know, just got done watching the series The Last Dance. Very good series, man. Go watch it. Go watch it, man. Jordan's that dude. But yeah, we finna watch. I imagine it's like because Scottie and Charles teamed up once upon a time, and Charles never won anything, and Scottie won. But Charles is the better talent. That's facts, but he probably had too much ego to listen to what Scottie had to say. So that's why he never won. He never learned how to win. But Scottie knows how to win, so he knows what it took. But Charles didn't want to listen. I imagine that's how it was when they teamed up. Yeah, we finna get into it, man. Let's see. Scottie Pippen, Charles Barkley. Do it, dude. Charles Barkley was that dude, bro. And that man was a beast. But we finna get into it.
Pippen and Charles Barkley spent over a decade as acquaintances, playoff opponents, fellow All-Stars, Olympians, and public figures. Those years passed mostly without incident, but when Pippen and Barkley reached their twilights, they became co-workers. It went poorly. This beef hit the grill in early 1999 and got burnt to a crisp before that year ended. Should we have seen it coming? How did Scottie Pippen and Charles Barkley feel about each other throughout the late 80s and 90s? Let's examine. Before his strange final seasons, Charles Barkley was an MVP-level superstar, capable of carrying teams deep into the playoffs. But those teams never made it all the way, thanks in part to one of Barkley's best friends. Barkley and Michael Jordan were very close in this era. They hung out, played golf, and made award-winning films. Even as NBA Finals opponents, Chuck and Mike enjoyed each other's off-court company. But on the court, Jordan and the Chicago Bulls were most cruel to Charles. They always won in the playoffs, against Barkley's Sixers in 90 and 91, and against Barkley's Suns in those 1993 finals. Jordan had people. Most of all, he had Scottie Pippen, one of the greatest defenders ever, a scorer talented enough to lead any other team, the kind of overqualified sidekick Barkley would have killed for. Hold that thought. So we have MJ, his best teammate, and his best pal, who was often an opponent. What sort of triangle was this? Was it scalene? Was it another kind of triangle? Early on, Pippen and Barkley seemed to get along fine. They sometimes guarded each other and did so with an acceptable level of competitive energy. They played in all-star games together. They traveled the world together as Olympians. And they shared sponsors. Here's a Coke commercial they did together, albeit one in which Charles trucked Scottie into a wall. The only clashes visible to the naked eye were of the ordinary macho variety, like all this grappling and trash talk they exchanged during the '93 All-Star Game, which smelled to Magic Johnson like a preview of June.
And that just to let Pippen know, if we reach the finals, you reach the finals, this is what you're going to get.
Barkley and Pippen laughed off that all-star battle, although Scottie would not repeat what was said. But Magic was right. Scottie and Charles matched up plenty in the '93 finals and had their moments. Scottie dunked on Charles, Charles talked shit, Scottie came out of it with a ring. Pretty regular stuff. Wholesome, basketball-level conflict. Any real intrigue came later, like when Roland Lazenby wrote about Pippen berating Barkley for kissing the ass of a finals opponent. So, not nothing, but nowhere near full-blooded beef. Later that year, Jordan retired for the first time. The Bulls became Scottie's team. After a season and a half leading the way, Scottie got fed up. By early 1995, it was well known that Pippen wanted to be traded.
He's the best player in the world.
But a trade was not in Pippen's fate. He remained a Bull through the deadline, much to his dismay. Then Jordan returned a month later, and this side of the triangle won 3 more championships. The non-trade was one of several times the Bulls held on to a grumpy Scottie, and that turned out okay for both parties. Barkley wanted what the Bulls had. In 1996, he demanded a trade and got it, to the Houston Rockets, where he'd join one of the players he most admired, Hakeem Olajuwon. Those Rockets teams were good, but the core players were aging, often injured, and the Stockton-Malone Jazz knocked Houston out of consecutive postseasons, earning the chance to watch Mike and Scottie win rings 5 and 6. After the '98 championship, the NBA had itself a lockout. Just as the league reopened for business in January of '99, Jordan retired again. It was time for the Bulls to start over, and they weren't going to do that by handing the 33-year-old Pippen a big new contract. Instead, Scottie went to Houston in a sign and trade, agreeing to a contract worth $67 million over 5 years. Big money, not the kind of cash Houston could pay him without making some room under the salary cap. To make said room, Barkley accepted a 1-year contract worth $1 million, perhaps half as much as he could have earned. Everyone got a kick out of a former MVP making less salary than, say, Matt Bullard, but Barkley was a good sport about the pay cut and welcomed Scottie. Charles really wanted a ring, and Scottie appreciated that.
Having Charles really campaign to get me here, really, showed me that he wants to win a championship.
Very sweet, but don't forget,
I gave $60 million.
the so-called Super Friends, a Hall of Fame frontcourt, sounded ready for action, although ready is a relative term. Barkley had spent the work stoppage recovering from 2 injuries. Surgery on a torn triceps he'd suffered in the '98 playoffs, plus chronic hernias. That's a lot of rehab for a guy whose work ethic people often doubted, people including Michael.
Charles Barkley, I told, would never win because he doesn't dedicate himself to winning, but
Jordan found time in his damn retirement press conference to call one of his best friends lazy. Incredible. And in character, Barkley arrived a couple days late to Rockets training camp because he'd spent the weekend golfing with Michael. Pippen, who was coming off back surgery himself, made note of that and said he'd sit down with Charles to talk about the dedication needed to go for it. A relationship that once hinged on this guy was getting much more intimate. Early on, that went fine. The Super Friends had a lot of fun playing together in the brief preseason. Golf notwithstanding, Charles was in shape. He'd actually spent the off-season conditioning for once, forced by the criticism to reflect and self-motivate. Barkley was even working with Jordan's trainer, Tim Grover, who followed Pippen to Houston. Barkley missed a couple weeks of February after yet another surgery, but still sounded positive. The team was more cohesive with Pippen. Everybody was working toward the same goal. Pippen didn't necessarily agree. In Phil Jackson's triangle offense, he'd been the second scorer and top front court option. It was tough adjusting to Houston's system, where he was a third option behind 2 commanding inside presences. These quotes from right after Barkley's knee surgery bear the faintest aroma of beef. In earshot of a reporter, Charles joked that Scottie should lend him $10 million. Scottie told the same reporter that in the Houston offense, he caught himself standing around more than he was accustomed to. And that was without Barkley taking his touches away. By March, Charles was back, and Pippen really aired out his discontent. Scottie didn't feel involved. He wasn't having fun. He didn't understand why the Rockets had wanted him. He also fully understood that complaining caused problems for his team. Coach Rudy Tomjanovich tried to accommodate Pippen, but it was hard since the former superstar was putting up some of the worst numbers of his career. Pippen found some trouble off the court, too. He got arrested in April for drunk driving. And here I'll point out Charles reacting by calling Scottie a role model and by teasing him over the team playing PA. Weird time. 2 weeks later, the Rockets headed to Los Angeles for a first-round playoff series against the Lakers. Game 1 presented the Rockets their best chance to pull ahead and steal the series, but they botched crunch time. Olajuwon missed what could have been the dagger, and on the rebound, Barkley grabbed Shaquille O'Neal, a famously bad free throw shooter. Indeed, Shaq missed 1 of 2, preserving Houston's lead, but on the next play, Pippen lost the ball trying to beat Kobe Bryant off the dribble. Kobe ended up winning it with 2 clutch free throws. Scottie saved his post-game grief for Barkley's intentional foul on Shaq. Charles didn't want to get into a battle, but defended his decision. He noted that Houston had the lead and the ball until Scottie turned it over. In any event, LA took 2 of the next 3 games and won the series. Season 1 of the Super Friends was over, and the Friends weren't feeling so super. Barkley was leaning toward retirement, though he'd said that before. Pippen called the season in Houston a challenge, started contacting Houston about a reunion. Pippen liked the idea of rejoining Phil, and by mid-August, he'd asked for a trade to LA. Pippen's agent described his client as frustrated, unwilling to stomach another year in an offense where one of the best players in the world was relegated to throwing entry passes. At the time those quotes came out, Barkley and Pippen were together in Hawaii for a big golf outing. Yet Charles said he heard nary a peep from Scottie about any trade demand. He found out through the news. Charles told Scottie he was disappointed in him. He told the Houston Chronicle that Scottie should apologize to the fans, the team, and to Charles himself. Be a man. And he went further. He felt Scottie was looking for another no-lose situation like Chicago, where winning would be a credit to his leadership and losing would be someone else's fault. Barkley said he'd heard the Lakers didn't even want Pippen. He called Pippen a baby, but made it clear that Houston wanted and needed that baby back on the team. Even with that looming uncertainty, Charles planned to sign a new contract with Houston. 1 year, $9 million. That was compensation for the Pippen-friendly cut he'd taken the prior year, although Charles now says it was short of what he'd been promised. He responded accordingly. Pippen and Barkley both traveled to Europe and actually played together in a Nike-sponsored All-Star game against Barcelona. Team chemistry didn't sound too great in that setting either. But in August, Pippen wasn't saying much beyond that he expected to become a Laker. In late September, Scottie went in. Pippen was still a Rocket, but burned that bridge anyway. He sneered at Barkley's demands for an apology and called some names.
Anything, he owes me an apology for coming and play with his star effect, but...
After one season in close proximity, Pippen agreed completely with Jordan's diagnosis of Barkley.
He doesn't show me the desire to want to win, and I probably should have listened to Michael a year ago when he said that Charles never will win a championship because he doesn't show any dedication.
This was war. The Rockets did not want war. If they had any misgivings about trading Pippen, their hand was now forced. They had to get a deal done before training camp, and they did, sending Pippen not to LA, but to Portland in exchange for most of the Blazers bench. So Rockets camp opened without any distraction. It was the dawn of a new era. But of course, reporters asked Charles about the Pippen interview. He responded with his usual blend of criticism and humor. He didn't like being called out publicly.
I think also he crossed the line. There's some guys, like I said, I played with I did not like, but I would never voice that opinion about them publicly.
And if Scottie was only going to apologize at gunpoint, Charles was happy to oblige.
Well, he said he would never apologize.
Even at gunpoint.
But as you know, I always carry a gun with me. So if I get arrested for murder, y'all know he didn't apologize.
Barkley implied it was insecurity that caused Pippen to break an unwritten rule by attacking a teammate. Now that they were separated, Charles said he was pumped up to prove Scottie wrong. From Blazers camp, Pippen was like, oh hey, when I called Charles fat and said he wasn't dedicated to winning, I didn't mean that personally. He predicted that all this would be forgotten when the two next met. But as far as apologizing to Charles...
Does it still stand that Barkley wouldn't get an apology from you even at gunpoint as you stated last week?
No, I don't know Charles an apology, and I'm not really looking forward to making it more.
So Pippen wasn't going to talk to his old teammate, but he kept right on talking about him. Scottie said he took heat from the media because reporters loved Barkley. Pippen said Barkley made too big a deal of the pay cut, that he hadn't made Barkley do that, and hey, that's what happens when only one team wants to sign you. Pippen claimed he only ended up with the Rockets because the post-lockout free agency was so rushed. The war of words got people all excited for a late November showdown between the Blazers and the struggling Rockets, but just like Scottie predicted, nothing came of it. No confrontation, no acknowledgement, no words exchanged. Pippen said it was over and behind him. Barkley said the same thing his own way. A few days later, Sports Illustrated published a feature with some late arriving shots. Pippen said Barkley was a hypocrite for complaining about the public attacks. He said Barkley was lying about Pippen's silence during the golf outing in Hawaii with Jason Kidd as his witness. Barkley blamed Pippen for failing to live up to his large contract and said he stuck by him through all the negativity. Pippen recalled what Jordan had said in the press conference, and his wife Larsa put it bluntly. Scottie didn't let the Rockets down. The sorry Rockets didn't want to work hard. But the feud was over. A ruptured quadriceps tendon the same month permanently ended Barkley's championship pursuit. Scottie and Charles would never again share a basketball court. Pippen broadcast his sympathy, but wasn't quite sure how to offer direct condolences. Should he just send a plant? He figured Charles didn't want a call from him. Pippen praised Barkley in his own way. He said the league would miss him, or at least would miss beating him. That tone reads like the old Jordan-era Pippen-Barkley relationship. Less outright name-calling, more respectful, detached distaste. It's mostly how things have been since. Charles and Scottie crossed paths. They were in the same Hall of Fame class. They paid tribute to Dirk Nowitzki together. They've done commercials together, like this Foot Locker one where they share the punchline.
All I know is all the greats have short memories. Scottie Pippen knows.
I sure do. And I'm the greatest Chicago Bull of all time.
Mostly they're TV personalities whose turns in the news cycle occasionally overlap. Sometimes they talk about each other, sometimes even kindly.
We all know Charles got a great personality, so
Barkley's relationship with Jordan has wavered at times, with Pippen roped into some of the public mockery. But with or without Michael as intermediary, the relationship between the two seems to have settled into its natural state. As acquaintances, associates, and even rivals, these guys do fine. But in 1999, strange forces combined to place Charles Barkley and Scottie Pippen in the same orbit. Just those months of shared space and mutual objectives were enough to ignite a pretty nasty beef. So maybe don't put two people like this on the same team. It's a bad idea.
That was deep, man. It's crazy. Charles Barkley and Scottie Pippen, man. Anyways, yeah, like I said, we're coming off The Last Dance. If you haven't watched it, watch it, man. It's cool. Stay tuned, man. Jordan's just a regular cat. He was just great at basketball, man. So thank you for watching the video. Make sure you guys